David Barnett, so lovely to have you here with us on Doing Business in. And today we're going to talk about Australia. Although, of course, you've been working literally across all of Asia-Pacific. You were the Managing Director of Pearson Australia's business, but also managing Asia, all of Asia, excluding Greater China. And of course, you are very well known in the education industry, but not only. David, what are you up to nowadays?
Well, Gabriele, first of all, let me say it's great to be with you for this opportunity with you today. So I left Pearson in the middle of last year after over 30 years with the company, and I had a wonderful career at Pearson and had lots of opportunities to, I think, probably to really learn what it meant to lead people and to create cultures that deliver strong and sustainable performance over time, while also maintaining and creating a really supportive and nurturing and caring culture. And for me, the really interesting art in management and leadership is how you create cultures that create true value for stakeholders, but also an environment that where people can flourish and thrive. And that's not easy, but it's the great responsibility of leadership, I think. So I left Pearson, had a break, had a sabbatical during COVID, and then just in the last month or so, I've started a couple of new roles. I'm kind of an accidental portfolioist at the moment, if that's a word. So I'm a non-executive director for a company called E2, and then I'm also working with a company called Adventus as a strategic advisor. Adventus is an online, as a international student recruitment platform.
You've been leading a very significant part of a multinational company, foreign multinational to the Australian perspective. So I wonder what you would like to tell us about what the great opportunities are when it comes to doing business in Australia. Why would a business look at investing here specifically across the wider region?
Look, all my comments, let me say at the beginning, Gabriele, all my comments are generalizations, obviously. So I will say things that won't always be borne out by everyone's experience, but I hope these are helpful observations and reflections. I mean, first of all, I think Australia, as we all know, Australia is a stable democracy, prosperous democracy. And so Australia is a great place to run a business. It's a place where obviously there's a high level of transparency, where companies feel they can operate in a reliable and consistent and predictable way. And I think it's very important for organisations to feel they've got that stable foundation. So that is certainly there. I think also, Australians are interesting. Sometimes Australians are underestimated or misunderstood because we're generally more relaxed and laid back. And sometimes, in my experience, people have interpreted that to mean not ambitious or not hardworking. And actually, I think the opposite is true. I think Australia is actually a very hardworking culture. If I compare Australia to, say, the UK or other cultures, we are very hardworking. We like to generally start work early. If you go on the roads at 6:30 in the morning, you'll be teeming with cars. So Australians are hardworking. I think they're ambitious, but also they like a balance. And I think that's what's interesting about Australians. I think Australians won't sacrifice absolutely everything for work and career. They generally want to have the opportunity to enjoy lifestyle. So I think it makes us a very interesting nation in terms of the work culture and employing Australians. So I think that's really important. I think as well, obviously Australia's a well-educated nation, so getting, and I'll come back to this, getting a supply of workers is reasonably safe and secure, although I think there are some challenges in it, thanks to the pandemic, around labour supply, which I'll come to a bit later. So look, I think it's a great place for companies to do business. I think there are some challenges, but in general, I think it's a great place to be.
And how about Australia's geographic location? And I'm speaking here specifically Asia-Pacific.
Well, I think we in Australia have a great opportunity with our location. I think, first of all, obviously Australia, English is the native language of Australia. So given that English is also the native language or the preferred language of business generally around the world, Australians have a natural advantage in Asia to be people who can kind of span that divide and whose command of English is actually a real advantage. And I think I've also seen Australians, because we're generally more egalitarian than other societies, I think we can mix in Asian cultures more successfully perhaps than other Western cultures can. We don't carry the baggage that, say, the US can sometimes carry in some Asian cultures. And I think as well, because Australians have generally travelled a lot in Asia, we're very comfortable with Asian cultures. We mix very well with people from different backgrounds in Asia. And I think sometimes we can also span across, Asia is not a homogenous culture, obviously. And there are many cultures in Asia that don't necessarily blend all that well with each other. So I think sometimes Australians can come along and, help Asian people from different cultures work together effectively, in a business setting. So I think as well, the time zone makes it really easy to collaborate with colleagues if you're in the same organisation. You don't have those terrible time zone issues you've got with the US and the UK and other countries around the world. So I think we've got a great opportunity, a great natural advantage. On top of that, people from all over Asia love to visit Australia, and that might be for a short term or indeed a longer term. As we know, lots of people in Australia have come to live here from all over Asia.
Is there anything additional you would like to say about Australia as a location?
Yes, Gabriele, there is actually. I think the points I've made about Australia being a stable and prosperous nation with a good supply of employees, all that's true. But Australia only really, for most multinationals, represents a very small percentage of their global business. So you might say, well, why bother with Australia? Well, there's actually a very important additional reason why, and that is Australia can be a wonderful place to test new ideas, to launch new products, and it's a great place as well to prove and develop leaders for all the reasons I've outlined. And I think that there are many, many examples over the years of where companies have been really smart about how they use Australia. And I don't mean that in a way that Australia is not important on its own, but every organisation has to make choices and priorities and all of that, and every organisation looks at its territories as almost as a portfolio of where you might expect faster growth, where you might expect to launch new ideas and so on. And I think Australia is a great place to launch new ideas, test new products, and develop new leaders.
What is it there that you felt over your career needs to be continuously managed or mitigated, or really being dealt with from a managerial and a leadership position?
Yeah, look, our size can be a problem. So people who haven't been here or haven't learned about Australia are shocked by the distances in Australia and the time it takes to get from one side of the country to the other, and sometimes the logistical challenges if I know of colleagues who work in the transportation industry, and it's very challenging. Where even though most of our population is concentrated around the seaboards on the east side of the country, there are many people who live all over the country. So I think that's a challenge. I think as well, our broadband has lagged the rest of the world. So while I think generally speaking, people have got reasonable broadband these days, we're still way behind other developed nations. So I think that's an ongoing challenge. I think, as I mentioned earlier, labour supply is an increasing issue for us. I think the pandemic obviously closed the borders and closed 190,000 immigrants a year, many of whom are highly skilled and highly educated immigrants.
Because much of that talent had been brought in, right?
Precisely, I think
it's needed. Yeah.
Particularly in technology, and Australia's got some very high-profile success in technology, but that probably papers over the fact that as a nation we haven't done enough to drive innovation. We haven't done enough. We haven't recognised. We've relied too heavily on our strength in natural resources, and we haven't invested enough in the real know-how we've had. And going back to when solar technology was first created, it was invented in Australia. but we took a long time to really capitalize on that technology, and we saw other nations do that. So I don't know whether that's something in the Australian psyche. Maybe we were complacent because going back in time, there was a saying Australia was riding on the sheep's back. So we relied on our wool exports at the time and our livestock exports, and then minerals, obviously. So I think we still carry the burden from that. And I think just building on the labour issue, I think we've got issues in the way we educate our young people, which are going to start to show up as the demand and the need for more highly skilled and highly educated workers increases, as we rely more on technology than other things. There is going to be a gap, and I think that's I can go into that in a bit more detail if that's helpful, but I think there's a real challenge there in terms of how federal and state education systems work, how we help students move from early childhood to primary to secondary to post-school education, the way vocational education still struggles to be accepted as a legitimate alternative to formal university education. So there are many things that are present in the Australian education system that I think are going to create issues for us going forward as a nation.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. And so, what advice would you share with emerging leaders, with people who are currently studying and studying to actually, either through programs that are, say, masters in management or international business or what have you, those MBA kind of studies, or maybe also people who, like we do at Federation University, really are in industry already, are, looking at short courses, micro-credentials to upskill, reskill, etc.
I think alongside of the formal structures in higher ed, there needs to be a way to really more rapidly deploy shorter skills-based education to address those short-term needs that people have, that students have, that workers need. And I think that workers need to get into the mindset of ongoing education as being just a way to keep current, rather than doing these sort of big blocks. We've tended to think we'll do undergraduate and then we'll come back and do postgraduate and then I'm sort of done. I think we need to think differently. I think organisations need to also bring the same ethos to how they manage their workers. I think to be successful, and probably now at the point of just table stakes in terms of attracting and retaining good staff, is offering them a whole suite of options around their own ongoing learning and development, and that's everything from time off to study to sponsored programs to any range of learning and development options that are available for workers, because I think that's the only way for people to stay current, the only way for companies to be competitive operating in this environment with companies all over the world is through that kind of ongoing commitment to skill development.
Yeah, and that are often shorter and more timely as well.
Short, timely,
customized,
digestible, in the moment, available anytime. I think there's a quick reflection I might make is that the pandemic, with all of its challenges, sort of swept up quite a negative perception around online learning because of, frankly, all the fatigue we had around time spent on video calls. But I think that really dismisses the opportunity around continuing to make that experience better, because it can be better. It's not, of course, it's not the same as face-to-face, but it can be much better perhaps than the perception is through the pandemic. So
absolutely.
Lots of opportunities there as well.
Engaging and impactful. So if we rewind time a little bit and put you into your younger self at the beginning of your management career, and you would have the opportunity of tapping into bite-sized learning, say digital, say blended, could also be face-to-face. But if you had those opportunities at that moment in time, what do you think, which skills, which themes, which topics, if I asked you to choose 3 top topics that you would choose from a large panoply and range of micro-credentials, which ones would you take?
Great question. Well, one would definitely be digital skills, because I think over the years, I've tried to keep up my digital skills, but it's such a rapidly growing area that I think I certainly would have benefited from a bit of that early on. I think secondly, I've thought a lot over the years about the famous Jack Welch quote that the biggest problem in business today is lack of candor. And I still think that's a big issue. And I think in Australia, our natural directness has been rubbed off people as they grow up. I think Australians have a natural directness, which we're born with, I think. But that's sometimes misinterpreted as other things like rudeness or just discourtesy or something. And I think that could be a real strength of Australians and Australians' culture. And I think we need to bring it back. And I think so. I'm not saying there's a micro-credential on Candor, but I think that there's
communication skills.
It's communication skills around in leadership, and it's that ability to be kind and direct at the same time. I think that is an art that we don't see enough of, frankly. The third one, I think the third one is strategy. I think how you think about preparing for the future and how you bring that, you create opportunities to genuinely think and reflect and plan is a really important skill that I think I would have loved to have learned a bit more about as a younger person.
Wonderful. Well, David Barnett, thank you so much for having shared those views with us.
Gabriele, Suder, always a pleasure.